When I was around 18, I had gotten let go from my job as a part-time retail associate in Iowa City, Iowa. The reason for my determination was because the company was going bankrupt and couldn't afford to pay their employees. At the time, my parents made me pay rent and other expenses, and because I no longer had a job, I had to find a new one. Searching for a job was a hassle, and it didn't help that there weren't many jobs that were part-time. On top of that, I was also a part-time college student, which only added to the stress. Weeks had passed and I still hadn't found myself a stable job. However, that was until one of my friends had called me, wondering if I could watch his dog as he was going on vacation that week. The reason he chose me was because the sitter who originally watched his dog had recently moved 3 states away, and he couldn't find anyone else. The pay was $600 for 3 days, which was still enough to get by, but meant I would still have to find another job soon. Desperate for pretty much any pay, I accepted his offer and agreed to look after his dog. His dog's name was Jem. She was a gorgeous saddleback German shepherd with the personality of a teddy bear. Of course, I was intrigued. I had arrived at his house, where he had left a list of all the rules. Feed her at this time, let her out every 2 hours, give her walks, etc. Basically the usual responsibilities when owning any dog. Caring for a dog may seem easy, but it gets stressful after a while when you constantly have to let them out. The first night went smoothly with no accidents and had gotten done every rule on the list. However, that was until the second night of dog sitting, where something happened that would completely shock me. For some context, it was around 8 or 9 p.m. I had ordered some food and was watching a movie with Jem laying next to me. At one point during the movie, she sits up and perks her ears while tilting her head, as if she saw or heard something. The house was next to a wooded area, so I had figured it was possibly a squirrel or some other critter. Soon after, though, she started looking around and began barking in the direction of the hallway. Almost immediately, she jumps down from the couch and runs to the hall. At this point, I started to get a little worried, as I didn't know what she could possibly be barking at. Curious, I follow her and see that she's barking at the door that led into the basement. I didn't even dream of opening that door and instead pulled her away. However, she wouldn't comply and pushed the door open, fleeing down the stairs. Darkness filled the basement, and so I get out my phone to help light my way down. This was before Apple had built-in flashlights, so I used my screen to illuminate whatever was down there. After feeling around for it, I find the light switch and see Jem sitting by a small closet door. This was one of those closet doors with the see-through ridges, so I was able to slightly see inside. Ever so carefully, I approached the door and pulled Jem away, but not before taking a quick look inside. Staring back at me was an eye. Pretending not to notice, I drag her out of there and run to the living room to call the police. I tried my absolute best to whisper into the mouthpiece, as I didn't want to make any noise. However, even with me being so quiet, it didn't help as Jem was still barking. As I'm on the phone with the operator, I begin to hear someone coming up the wooden steps from the basement. The person slowly knocks, as if there were a way to frighten me even more. All the while, Jem was barking her head off, trying to break down the basement door. The sounds of sirens being heard in the distance was music to my ears as they drew closer. All the while, I hear the person down there start running down the stairs and hearing the door open. Fortunately, police were fast to respond as they arrived to the house in minutes. As it turns out, police had found what appeared to be some secret room in the basement. Me, nor my friend, had any acknowledgement of this room and didn't even know what it was for. Our best guess was that it was some sort of wine cellar that was used back then. My friend paid me extra for the trouble, and I never dug sat for him again. I'm not sure if police ever found the man, or the possibility that he's still out there somewhere. The scariest part about this is that there was reason to believe the man had been hiding in that room for months. Inside were stolen items, beer cans, food, and even a sleeping bag. My friend had since moved cities recently as him and his family couldn't shake off the paranoia. This just goes to show you that you can't even enjoy the safety and comfort of your own home. When I was 9, I was staying home alone. It was early morning and I had just gotten out of the shower and brushed my teeth. I put on my favorite outfit, set up a little area in the living room with a drink and a snack, and then turned on the TV to watch something. The phone rang. I went across the house to go answer it. The voice on the other end was, well, really familiar and really comforting for me. He asked me about my day so far and he made small talk. After about a minute or so, he then said, I like your outfit. Is pink your favorite color? I replied back with, oh, thank you. No, it isn't. What were you planning on watching on TV? He asked. It took me a few seconds to understand what was happening as I was only 9 years old and very naive. The voice on the other end of the phone then changed. It became deep and raspy and horrific. The voice then proceeded to describe all these horrible things that they wanted to do to me and in detail. I went numb. My skin felt as if it were on fire and my heart was racing. I had never been more terrified in my entire life. I slammed down the phone and then I called my mom at work. I tried to explain what happened and shit. I was making much sense. She got onto me for answering the phone and she told me to go back about my day. I remember trying to explain to her that he was watching me and that he told me what I had been doing and that he knew what I was wearing. I also mentioned that I was going to call 911. One, because I needed help. That isn't necessary. I'm not coming home. Just don't answer the phone and go watch TV, she said, and then I hung up. I was really confused and I was scared. I could feel his eyes on me. I pulled the curtains closed and I raced around the house, torn between doing what I felt was right and doing what I had been told by my mother. This whole time the phone was ringing. The second it would stop, it would just start up yet again. The sound of the phone ringing would pulse through my entire body like electricity. It was practically paralyzing me. It was like I was frozen, but also on fire at the same time. I waited for a pause in the ringing and called 911. I'm home by myself and I'm 9 years old and someone's watching me and telling me they're going to kill me. I told the operator. She tried to keep me calm and she said that she would send help for me. I remember standing there listening to this kind voice just trying to help me, but I could feel every scary movie scenario just playing out behind me. Was he creeping up behind me with a knife? Was he going to shoot me through a window? Was he going to throw a rock through the glass and open the door? I just didn't know. I couldn't breathe and I couldn't feel my body. In a moment of panic, I set off the alarm to the house and ran outside. I remember this sense of relief, but also this overwhelming feeling of having a separation in my reality. The house felt small and dark and really dangerous and cold. Outside felt open as well as safe and warm. I could hear lawnmowers and the sounds of birds chirping. It was a beautiful break from that bone-chilling feeling of the phone. It was like I was watching a movie and I could see myself experience both of these environments at the same time. A neighbor was pushing his child in a swing. He was concerned. He let me stand next to him and he protected me. I could hear the sirens now, the blaring sound getting louder as they grew closer. It felt like it took an eternity, but the police finally arrived. An officer walked over to me and he asked me what happened. I did my best to explain it, but so many of the words on the phone that were used were just so embarrassing. I couldn't bring myself to use such dull words to a police officer, and his other words were just bone-chilling. I couldn't say those either. To this day, I can still hear my young voice repeating the words. He was watching me. He said he was going to kill me. Not long after my mom's car pulled into the driveway, she for some reason decided to come home. She didn't look for me or come to speak to me. She just calmly got out and then walked over to the police officer. I was standing in the doorway from the house to the garage just facing the driveway. I could see my mom and the police officer. I was watching and trying to understand, trying to figure out what was happening. Then I saw it. She was laughing. My face was swollen from tears. My heart still racing and my skin was on fire and my mom was laughing. What the hell was going on? Very slowly, I crept a little closer and I then overheard. I'm so sorry about this. I guess you just got scared being home alone and overreacted. I'm really sorry. What the hell's happening? What did I do wrong? Did I imagine this? Was this a dream? Should I not have called 911? Did I actually overreact? My memory of what happened after that is a little hazy. I remember refusing to stay home alone and the sound of the phone ringing just rippling through my body. It wasn't something I liked discussing. I refused to repeat what had been said to me by the voice on the phone. My mom decided that she knew who did it, but she didn't even know the details. There was no investigation. No one was questioned. She told me it was a boy who was the same age as me who lived across the street. I knew that was impossible, but no matter how much I protested it, I was always told that it was him. Many years later, after I was an adult with my own children, we were at Christmas. Everyone was in the living room and I had gone into the back bedroom to change the diaper. As I was walking out of the room and back into the living room, I could hear my mom laughing, her voice as if she had been telling a joke. The faces of everyone else in the room told a different story. Discomfort, anguish, shock, fear, yet she was still laughing. It felt as if I was walking in slow motion. One of my older children had actually stopped me from entering the living room and sort of pushed me back into the room that I had just come out of. She just told the story of you being home alone and the man threatening to kill you. She told it like it was a joke or something, like some funny story from your childhood. My child told me. To this day, I never learned who it was that called me. I deal with my fear of ringing phones and phone conversations on a daily basis. It's awful. One night, I was watching The Conjuring at home with my little sister when we heard someone putting a key in our front door as well as opening it. We were sitting in the living room next to a sliding door that was also very close to the front door, so we both heard it very clearly. Now, this didn't really alarm us since we knew that our dad had recently gone out to get some things, so we kind of just assumed that maybe he had returned. Dad, you're back already? I casually asked. There was no response. Dad, are you there? I asked it again, thinking he hadn't heard me the first time. Once again, just silence. Right at this point, I'm starting to get the feeling that something isn't quite right, and I could tell by the look on my sister's face that she was just as nervous as I was. We started to look at each other for a brief moment, wondering what we should do before we started hearing a few more scattering sounds from right outside the sliding door. By this stage, I was frozen in fear. I tried one more time in a louder but shakier voice. Dad, is that you? But the silence continued. Now at this point, I'm freaking out and I literally jump right off the couch. My sister also abruptly gets up and starts rapidly walking to the other end of the room, which leads to the kitchen area. She later revealed to me that she was planning on grabbing a knife. She had this horrified look on her face that I hadn't ever seen before. We just looked at each other in nervous silence. I didn't really know what to do and I didn't want to make any further sounds. I finally decided to walk up to the sliding door and began opening it as slowly as possible, now peering into the darkness. When the door was finally opened wide enough, I poked my head out and scanned the corridor, now preparing for the worst. To my surprise, there was no one there, but what was more strange was that the front door was still completely shut. My sister and I were obviously both extremely relieved as we were almost certain that there was an intruder in our house. After this, I immediately went to go and ask my mom if it was her or whether she had noticed anything. She told me that she thought my dad had come home as well, and she also heard someone opening the front door. Around a half an hour later, which felt like an eternity at the time as we were still quite shaken from the incident, my dad finally arrived home and he confirmed to us that he hadn't returned home earlier. To this day, my sister and I still have no idea what happened that night, and I guess we never will. This happened when I was 13. I lived in a duplex with my dad and brother. It was a two-bedroom, and I shared a room with my dad while my older brother had his own room. It wasn't that uncommon for both of them to have plans at night while I stayed home and played video games and alone. This night was no different. My dad was probably at some bar, and as for my brother, who really knows where he was, I was playing the original Resident Evil on PlayStation, and at around midnight my eyelids were getting really heavy, and I decided to go to bed. I had slept with my bedroom door wide open. Now, not one time in the years that we lived in this place did my dad or brother ever come home by entering through the back sliding glass door. There were a couple of times where my brother didn't have his key for one reason or another, and he knocked on my bedroom window to ask me to let him in. My dad always had his key though, and he would always come through the front door. On this night in question, I had heard the back door slide open. It was an old door, and sliding it open wasn't really that easy. It was also very loud, so I heard it crystal clearly. I lay in bed absolutely wide-eyed, my imagination going crazy. I heard whoever it was walk through the dining room, then through the kitchen, and then into the living room. They had made no attempt to be quiet. After a brief silent pause, I saw someone walk by my bedroom doorway. This scared the living hell out of me, as you can imagine, and my heart throbbed. Whoever was in my house walked into the bathroom that was right next to my bedroom, then flicked the light on. The light poured into my bedroom, and I was just laying there absolutely terrified, completely exposed by the light from the bathroom. You're probably wondering why I didn't shout for my brother or my dad. Well, because like I mentioned earlier, I knew it wasn't them and there was no one else that it could have been that would have made sense to me. Not a family member and definitely not a friend. I just knew that it was someone that didn't belong. The person then walked out of the bathroom, left the light on, then went into my brother's room and started making a ton of noise. It sounded like they were searching for something. All I did was lay there shivering. After a few more minutes, the person walked by my bedroom again. I expected at any moment that a stranger would then walk into my room, but they didn't. I heard them making noise in the living room, walking around huffing and puffing. Then they started walking back and forth right by my bedroom repeatedly, into the bathroom and then back out, over and over. At the time, I was 100% sure they were messing with me for some reason. They knew I was there, whoever they were. I heard the person making noises. By this and by the really huge figure that I saw walking back and forth, I knew it was a man. They continued walking around each room except for the one I was in, and then suddenly I heard them walk back through the house to the back sliding door, open it, and then leave. I lay there in bed terrified, just wondering what the hell just happened. After a while, out of sheer exhaustion, I fell asleep. In the morning, I found that my dad and brother were home. I have asked the both of them dozens of times, but they both promised me that it wasn't them. Plus, again, why the hell would they go through the back door, then leave again through the back door? This was about 21 years ago. I'll never know who it was or why they were there. Nothing was missing either. What really makes me wonder to this day is why the hell they never came into my bedroom. I mean, the door was wide open and they walked by it at least 20 times. It just doesn't make sense. For context, I'm a girl, and this story took place when I was 18 years old. At the time, I was living with my father, but he was working long shifts away from home, so I spent a lot of time alone. One day, I was home alone and trying to study in my bedroom. It was around 7 p.m. and dark outside. I was used to studying alone like this with my headphones on. My bedroom was at the back of the house facing the garden, which has a gate at the back leading to a large field. It wasn't unusual to get distracted by the occasional noise at night because the fields were really popular with dog walkers. This time, though, it was different. I was trying to focus on my homework when a bright light came streaming through the window. I peeked out, expecting to see a person and their dog, but I couldn't locate the source of the light. I went back to what I was doing, assuming it was someone walking who'd accidentally shined the light at my window. The next night, it happens again. A bright light through my window, specifically with no dog walker in sight. This time, I was frustrated, and I questioned if it could be the same person being creepy or trying to see into my room as I kept the curtains open. I spent longer looking out the window this time, trying to figure out the source of the light. I soon realized it was coming from somewhere close. It was coming from my own garden, and the gate connecting to the field seemed to be open. My heart started beating really fast, and I didn't know what to do. I quickly texted my dad saying that I thought someone was in the garden. He told me to make sure that all of the doors were locked and that he'd be home as soon as he could. I snuck down the stairs as quietly as possible, not wanting whoever was outside to know I was there. I checked the front door and thank God it was locked. I crept to the back door facing the garden, and just as I was about to check it, I then saw the handle going down like someone was trying to open the door. Thankfully, that door was locked too. They did try a few times to open it. By this point, I was absolutely terrified and shaking. I heard them try and pull at the kitchen window as well, but they had no luck. I tried to get a look at the person, but all I could tell was that they were white and tall. It was too dark to pick out any features. They seemed to be getting frustrated now, and then started banging at the window like they wanted to force it to break or open. I looked towards the front of the house and my dad's car still wasn't there, and I was getting worried. Then by some miracle I heard my neighbor's back door open and their large dog barking loudly. They must have noticed the stranger and then let out their dogs to scare them away, and it worked. I haven't seen them around again. I've never been so thankful for my neighbor's loud dogs before. And now I always check the doors are locked, even more than I used to.